All right, this week we're going to talk about Trump's nominations. We're going to talk about the TikTok ban. It's not really a ban. We're going to talk about the LA fires. Man, there's a lot of news going on. I'm going to try to talk about as much as I can in about an hour. Let's go. Welcome to The Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm your host, Blake Fisher. I'm a political junkie so that you don't necessarily have to be. And what a couple weeks to be a political junkie. We've had so much news after a quick break over the holidays. Last week's episode, if you didn't check it out, I talked to Josh Lewis from the Saving Elephants podcast, and we talked specifically about what we thought the Democrats and Republicans should learn from the 2024 election, and will they learn those lessons going forward, what we think they should do. But we didn't really talk about the news because, frankly, we recorded it over the Christmas break, and nothing was going on at the time. And then last week and this week, the news has ramped up significantly. So I feel like there's a ton of stuff to talk about. I try to only talk about things on here that I think will matter in certainly by the time you listen to it. Little spoiler alert, I tend to record these on Wednesdays and release them on Thursday morning, but sometimes the way the news works is I can't record something on Wednesday and it be relevant on Thursday because new information has come out. And really beyond that, it's not just that I want it to be relevant for when the podcast comes out. I also want it to be worth taking up your mental capacity. So I really only try to talk about things that I think will matter a week from now or a month from now at the minimum. Like, I really try to think, okay, is this going to matter in 30 days? And if I don't know if it will, or if I think that significant amounts of information will change about that in the next 30 days, then I don't tend to talk about it. So while there's lots of stuff going on in the news, some of it I'm ignoring because I think we don't have enough information yet. And I'm not trying to be your sole news source. That's not my goal here. My goal is to talk in depth about the things that I think are going to matter and the things that are worth us thinking about, arguing about, really getting into the sort of political discourse about. So that being said, there's way too much that happened this week that I think will matter in 30 days. I'm going to try to cram it all into one episode, but maybe if I don't get it all in this episode, there's a couple places that I would suggest you maybe check out if you want to hear more. One, I am a guest on someone's show on Friday. We call it Up the Middle. It's a guy, Ross Yerger. He is a former Secret Service agent, and we do a live radio show for a couple of hours on Fridays from 10 a.m. to noon Central. You can do the time zone math to figure out what that time is where you are. And it's me and him and a Democrat. And we argue about these things that come up throughout the week. And that's a good, we talk about a lot more because we've got 2 hours to fill there. Also, I may start doing some more, some live shows or something where I can get more some sort of comments from you. If that's interesting to you, let me know. I don't want to do something like that if no one cares. So if you think that sounds fun to do a little more interaction, you could comment, you could, I don't know, maybe we could do call-ins or something if I could figure out how to make that work. So I might do a live later this week and kind of do more of a popcorn about all the other things that are going on. And maybe I'm more willing to get into something that is more of a obscure political story on something like that than on this. I want this to have meat on the bones. So much going on this week. So the first thing I want to talk about is Trump's nominations. I've not talked much about any of Trump's nominations. I've done a couple of shorts on a couple of them that I think were more egregious. Matt Gaetz specifically, who dropped out at some point and now is on Newsmax, I guess, or OAN. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. No one's paying attention to him. So I was outraged about a couple of them, Matt Gaetz mostly, and that's really the only thing I've talked about because I honestly didn't know if any of them would last. And it's funny that the one I picked to make a short about that I was outraged about ended up dropping out. So, I've been hesitant to talk about some of these because I go, okay, what's the benefit is there's two ways I think that I've read and sort of to think about Trump's nominees. I don't like Trump, didn't vote for him. I don't think he's qualified to be the president. I don't think he's very good at the job. And I think that most of the reason his first term had successes was because he listened to smart people sometimes or delegated stuff to smart people. And I think most of his wins came from the very people that he and MAGA are vilifying now. Honestly, Trump gets nothing done without Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is the reason he gets the Supreme Court nominees he gets. Mitch McConnell is the reason that the tax, and Paul Ryan for that matter, his tax cuts happen. There's quite a bit that, and now those are like sort of public enemy number one with MAGA crowd. And to me, that's just a little ridiculous. You can disagree with them. You can have disagreements about their form of republicanism or whatever. That's fine. But to write off all the people that worked in the Trump administration who ended up either leaving or being fired because at some point they were asked to do something that they felt was not right, then I just feel like the discounting that is crazy to me. So there's sort of these two forms of thought when it comes to Trump's nominees. Do you let Trump go all in on being Trump and nominate the worst people and give him, like, really show the country what they get if they let Trump be Trump? The downside to that, in my opinion, is that I live here and I don't want this to be a disaster. I don't want the whole country to burn. It's not worth me, as much as I want to be like, I told you so. That doesn't feel right to me to wish ill on the country as a whole just so that I can say I told you Trump was dangerous and he'd be a bad president. So that's one side of things. And I understand the arguments there. It's like, hey, let's give the people what they want. If they want unbridled populism and they want to burn it all down and they want to convict Trump's enemies and all this kind of stuff, okay, let's show them what that looks like. And I don't think they'll really like it. And let's let Trump create tariffs that are going to cause inflation and cause prices to go up, and they're going to hurt people's wallets, and people certainly that are in positions where grocery prices going up affect them more than maybe it affects me. And so I get that side of the argument. Then there's this other side of the argument that says, no, we should try to rein him in. And it's important that adults go work for that. It's, this sort of question that I've heard posed on multiple podcasts is like, if you were asked to go serve in the Trump administration, should you? Do you think it's good when people go, I need to go in there to be an adult in the room? It's an interesting conversation and starts bringing up Trump's nominees specifically for cabinet positions. The three that, besides Matt Gaetz, who's not a nominee anymore, the three that have gotten the most sort of pushback as being unqualified, disqualified for the job, however you want to say it, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Pete Hegseth, and Tulsi Gabbard. Those are probably the three that have gotten the most pushback from media, Republicans, conservatives, whoever. And I think it's pretty fair, the pushback that three have gotten. Two of them are Democrats. Let's just be frank about it. I don't understand how you can be MAGA and think that all Democrats are evil liberals and they're trying to destroy the country. And yet, like, when Trump nominates two Democrats, I realize Tulsi Gabbard is like, they're both former Democrats, but they were Democrats until Democrats said, we don't want you anymore. and essentially they didn't have a place in their parties. And I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was a Democrat until he realized he was going nowhere in the Democratic primary. And so he'd run as an independent instead. This was last year, guys. He has way out there, really progressive views on all sorts of things. And yet there's just been this embrace on the right, I guess because he wants to make America healthy again. Although I would argue, so he might be right on a couple of things. Even those, I would argue it's a little more nuanced than that when we're talking about food dyes and the FDA and some of that kind of stuff. So, I don't understand the capitulation to whatever Trump wants, Trump gets. But setting aside that argument, I just thought it'd be worth at least talking about Pete Hegseth because he went in front of the Armed Services Committee this week, basically for his sort of interview for this job. And Pete Hegseth is nominated for the Secretary of Defense, which runs the Pentagon, which is the Department of Defense is the largest employer in the United States. They employ 3 million people. 2 million of those are active service members, and 1 million of those are civilians that work at like the Pentagon, DOD, things like that. So it's a huge organization. Here's my opinion on Hegseth. Yesterday, he goes before the Armed Services Committee. There's a couple things I don't love about this. The first is that Hegseth did not he only met with one Democrat on the entire committee before the committee hearing. And that's abnormal. Normally, these cabinet picks will meet with anyone on the committees that request a meeting with them so that they can hash out maybe some of these questions that senators have before they get in front of everyone in the cameras and stuff. And he met with the Republicans, but not the Democrats. I don't love that because the Department of Defense is, well, I mean, all of these cabinet positions are supposed to serve the entire United States, and it shouldn't really matter on the partisan grounds of what they are. They have to answer to this committee throughout their career and stuff at the Defense Department. So it seems weird to me that he didn't meet with them. I think he could have alleviated some of the stupid performative questions that we saw yesterday from Democrats. I'm saying yesterday because it's Wednesday, but you're listening to this on Thursday or later. So this week, on Tuesday is when it happened. And frankly, I don't like that move by Hegseth. I don't understand what he has to lose by meeting with Democrats behind closed doors. Maybe he's worried that they're going to leak information or his answers or something. I don't know. Who knows? The point is he gets in front and basically gets softball questions from Republicans who seem to be warming up to him. And I would judge by yesterday that he will get confirmed by the Senate. I would just guess. But here's my problems with Pete Hegseth, and I just think they're worth laying out. The things that Democrats kept bringing up, he has a sexual assault allegation from 2017, and he settled that case out of court with the woman. Pete Hegseth was until a few weeks ago when he quit because he got nominated for this, was a Saturday morning host on Fox News. So this is like the C-level at Fox News. He seems like a smart guy. He's a good-looking guy. I mean, I think mostly Trump is nominating people that will be able to go on camera and say the things more eloquently than he can. I think that's honestly what most of these cabinet picks are. If you look at them, most of them are good at the PR kind of thing and good at talking, good at being in front of a camera. And I think that's his main priority. These are going to be the MAGA spokespeople. These are going to be Trump spokespeople. Although part of me wonders, will Trump really like anyone getting attention other than him? I would argue his ego can't handle that. But I mean, Pete Hegseth could certainly be the spokesperson or the recruitment PR guy for the Army. I mean, I'm confident he could do that job. He's ex-military. By all accounts, he served honorably. I find nothing wrong. I've not read anyone that has anything to say about his service in the United States military being wrong. But after he leaves the military, he runs a couple of nonprofits basically into the ground. Very badly financially mismanaged. And this is a guy that wants to be the top guy at the Pentagon who's not passed an audit ever. And that's one of the complaints he has. His opening statement is actually full of things that I go, yes, yes, yes. So, I mean, here's a few things that he says in his opening statement. I'm not doing direct quotes. I'm just kind of saying the things that he has said. So, Pentagon should be able to pass an audit. Yes, I do think we need to know when we give someone a budget and then we don't actually know where that money went. That bothers me as an American taxpayer. And we should be able to do that at the Pentagon, but we've never been able to. So we do need someone we should be able to pass a budget. My concern with his saying that is that he runs two small nonprofits that were in debt under they went into debt, massive debt under his. I think one of them had an $8 billion in donations, and they spent $8.5. Sorry, I said billion. I'm speaking in government terms. It's like an $8 million in donations, and they spent $9 million or $8.5 million. It's not great to be a nonprofit in debt, and these were, by all means, looks like nonprofits that were doing good things for ex-military and veterans, and sounds like a great cause, but it sounds like it was mismanaged when he was in charge of them. If he can't manage $8 million, how is he managing $800 billion, which is the budget of the Pentagon? So that concerns me. I think that's a legitimate thing to bring up. But yesterday, we heard some of that from Democrats, but it was mostly they went after these sexual allegations and these allegations of drunkenness on the job. By all accounts, he does seem like a partier. Maybe he's not an alcoholic. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But he certainly there's story after story after story of him being drunk at these parties, inappropriately so when these are work functions or charity functions. It does sound like he at least abuses alcohol regularly while on the job. The problem with the Pentagon and being the Secretary of Defense is that you are on the job 24/7. You can't really be drunk. And he's said that if he gets the position, he will quit drinking. That raises some red flags to me. Like I said, I don't know if he's an alcoholic or not, but they did a lot of focus on this, and they did a lot of focus on the sexual assault allegations. The thing about the sexual assault allegations, he did settle it out of court, and by reading the police report, I think it's pretty clear that I would say charges were not brought against him, because I think the police report shows that this was potentially a case of regret by the woman, because we have them on video kind of flirting with each other. We have them on video with her arm in arm with him going up to his room. This is at a hotel where they're at some event. He takes this woman up to his hotel room. Her husband is in another hotel room in the hotel. And I guess, when she wakes up sober and sneaks out of his room and realizes she's got to come up with some sort of excuse to go back to her husband's room, it just sounds like it's potentially regret. There's no evidence that, she seemed to willingly go up to his room. She claims that things changed after that, but it's hard to know. This turns into a he said, she said thing, and it's very hard to press charges in that kind of situation. So I understand. I don't know why you settle in that situation, because if I had done nothing wrong and it was consensual, I'm not settling ever this kind of lawsuit. I think there is a bit of what looks like guilt when you settle a lawsuit like that. But the thing is, I don't really care about that. I know that sounds terrible. The thing that did get brought up by Senator Tim Kaine, which I think is relevant, although it would be nice if they applied some of this to Democrats, he, at the time of this assault, this alleged assault, or at least this sex that happened, he was married. He had cheated on his wife with another woman who he had a baby with. That baby was 2 months old. The lady he had the baby with ends up being his third wife. And so he cheats on his wife and the lady that he just had a baby with this third person in the hotel room. I question your morals, frankly. And I go, and he tries to be like, look, I'm changed. I'm a Christian. But I see that change has come after he got this nomination, and that seems convenient to me. I didn't see some sort of admission of guilt in 2017 that, look, I've done bad things and I regret them and I'm going to try to be better. This looks like a convenient conversion to me. And I do question someone's judgment, but really it comes down to, for me, he mismanaged two charities. Can he really run an $800 billion budget as the Secretary of Defense? Does he show that he has any management skills that can manage 3 million employees? Does he show that we can do that kind of thing? So I agree. Like his opening statement, I agree with almost everything he said. Like we need to build up our arsenals. We absolutely need to recruit and retain military members better. We're not doing that well enough, especially when there's all sorts of global conflicts potentially going on. And it doesn't look like, I'm curious if we could actually have a two-front, like could we make it in a two-front war? I think what the complainers of the forever wars forget, and even the hawks, I think, forget that we were fighting like ISIS and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. We haven't fought a foreign power like Russia or China or Iran or any of these other countries. We haven't fought a country since, I guess the first Iraq war would count in the early part of the Iraq war, but we took out the Iraqi army like super quick in the Iraq war. That was really fast, and then the rest of it was trying to deal with terrorist groups. So we have not fought a major power in my lifetime. And I'm curious if our military would be able to do so. And I think it needs to be ready to do so, because I think China and Russia and Iran and North Korea and all these bad actors are stirring up all sorts of trouble around the world. And I think at some point in Trump's administration, I would be shocked if he's not called to do something about it. So I think the Secretary of Defense is going to be more important now than it has been for years. And I think he might, look, if he's converted and he's a stand-up guy, great. He's good on camera. I think he's smart. He's Princeton educated. I think that there's all and he went back to school. I think he went back to school after the military too. And so, look, there's all these things that he did, I think, that were great. That doesn't mean he's qualified for this job. So this comes down to the question of, if someone's unqualified for the job, should we not give it to them? I think I lean a little bit towards whatever happens, and that's fine. I just don't see him lasting very long, and I don't see him having success at the Department of Defense. Maybe that's unfair of me, but I guess we'll see. I think he'll probably cruise through. I think it won't be a problem for him. Some of Trump's other nominees mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. We haven't seen any interviews with her yet with committees. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I think, are the other two that are potentially going down. I think one of those three goes down. I don't see all of them getting in. If I had to guess right now, I think it's probably Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that has the toughest time getting in, because I think that, again, there's going to be a bunch of Republicans that are going to be more concerned about him than they are about Pete Hegseth, because he's at least on the right team. And I think that RFK Jr. was on the wrong team, less than a year ago. So that's how I think that's going to go down. I could be totally wrong about it. Look, it's hard to judge people's moral character. And I think that what Democrats surrendered in the 90s with Bill Clinton, and then Republicans surrendered with Donald Trump. And you can find a bunch of other examples in between where when someone does something morally wrong, they cheat on their wife, pick your poison. I mean, I think specifically the sexual stuff is especially gross. And basically it has now been just morally accepted by both sides. You have the Democrats saying, well, you know what Bill Clinton does with his private life is his own business. And I remember this being a kid in the 90s. And now I look back, and of course with the Me Too stuff, you go, oh, wait a minute. He was a sexual predator. He was taking advantage of his position of power and having sex with an intern at the White House, like a 22-year-old intern at the White House. That's morally wrong. And we would say, so what other things do you do that are morally wrong? I mean, I also think there's credible evidence that Bill Clinton raped people in the 90s. So let's talk about that. And then with Republicans, the excuse was Donald Trump. It doesn't matter about the Access Hollywood tape. It doesn't matter that this guy has cheated on every wife he's had. It doesn't matter that he had sex with a porn star. It doesn't matter. None of this matters because he's our guy. And I think we're now doing that with everyone. So if Pete Hegseth is on your side and on your team, it doesn't matter if he didn't sexually assault this woman. He still cheated on his wife and baby mama, I guess is what we would call her, and future wife with this third person. He's at least the way he takes advantage of women is at least, I don't think is morally okay. And so you have to go, okay, what other morals do you bend? If that's okay with you, these are concerns I have. And so I think it's worth talking about, worth looking at, but I think he'll get through. And if I had to pick one that I hope doesn't go through, I mean, it'd be RFK Jr. I just think that he will be a disaster. Again, it's a government agency, Health and Human Services, that's a fourth of the government's budget. So 25% of the budget goes to Health and Human Services between Medicare, Medicaid, FDA, all these different things. And frankly, I don't think he has the experience either, but we will see what happens. I want to talk a second about the LA fires, because I think they are important to talk about, although they're still burning. So we don't really know everything. And I think that it's worth pausing before all the finger pointing. At the start of these fires, it was almost immediate, within 24 hours, that you had Donald Trump and Republicans blaming this all on DEI or progressive values and sort of a lot of things that don't necessarily have to do with fires. And it seemed a little weird to me. And I think there's some legitimate blame to go around. I think that, to me, it's very obvious that we are not, in California and the United States Forest Service, are not doing controlled burns enough in some of these areas. And that's what I did a short on, because I think it's very obvious that all the wildfire experts have been saying for years, hey, this is going to happen, and you've got to do more prescribed burning. And so I think that's the only thing that I'm comfortable saying right now is a problem, because so many wildfire experts have said it's a problem. But the truth is, we don't really know why the hydrants were out in the Pacific Palisades. That was one thing people complained about, was these fire hydrants, they hooked up, there's no water coming out of them. Here's some reasoning behind some of this stuff that I think is worth pausing, waiting till the fires are out. Let's investigate all this stuff. Let's figure out who's things. Well, I just want to talk about a few things that I think are not worth complaining about right now. And let's look at the bigger picture. So Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles was in Ghana, in Africa, when these fires break out, and she does not rush home. She goes to this stupid medal ceremony or something that, like, I don't know why the mayor of LA is in Africa at a medal ceremony anyway. When she ran, she said she was not going to travel outside the state of California. She got on to Ted Cruz for being out of the country when the ice storms happened in Texas a few years ago. So to me, it's fair game to say, why were you in Ghana, Africa, when the weather report at least said that there were going to be really high winds and there were at least dangerous fire conditions? Why go out of town? But you know what? She couldn't have prevented the fire from happening. I think she's probably an incompetent mayor, and who knows if she'll last, but we can't blame her for the fires happening. I don't think that that's fair. And I also think that it's a stupid distraction. It's like, because she's a Democrat, she's going to get hammered for this. Republicans get upset when a hurricane comes through. It becomes target practice for Ron DeSantis or whatever in Florida, of Democrats in the media saying, oh, look at this, he did wrong. Look at this, he did right. And they're doing it in the moment, and they're not even doing it retrospectively. So I think Republicans should do the same thing. I think conservatives need to pause for a second. It's fine to call out, like, why is she in Ghana when she said she wasn't going to travel? I think that's a fair thing to say. Maybe it calls into some incompetence. Maybe she's not a good mayor. However, couldn't have prevented the fires. So I think that's the thing you got to focus on, is like, how do you prevent this from happening? What caused this to happen? We don't yet know how the fires got started. It's probably power lines. So people go, why not bury the power lines? Well, you got to have a conversation that says, how much does it cost to bury all the power lines in California, or at least in the wildfire prone areas, which, by the way, is a lot of California. Experts, don't ask me how they know this, because beats me in some way. They believe that prehistoric California burned 4 to 11 million acres a year in naturally occurring wildfires, obviously from lightning. If it's prehistoric, that's generally the reason you would have a fire start. And so, like, that's not climate change. That is not any of these things that we have excuses for why these fires happen. That's not densely populated areas. That's not any. That's like prehistoric California, up to 11 million acres they think burned annually because of naturally occurring fires. So this is an area of the country that definitely has naturally occurring wildfires. Every part of the country has something to deal with. We deal with tornadoes here in Oklahoma. Obviously, some places deal with blizzards. Some places deal with earthquakes and wildfires and hurricanes, and you pick it. Everyone's got these sort of natural disasters that naturally happen in their area. And part of a civilization is mitigating either the natural disaster happening, which wildfires is one of the few things you can do that with. We have no way right now to prevent a tornado from happening. There's no way to do it. There's no way to prevent like flooding, for example. If you get you can not build in flood zones, I guess, but like the Nashville flood that happened was that 2010, 11, sometime in that range. That was like a 1,000-year flood. Like something like that only happens every 1,000 years or so, and it was devastating, but there's nothing you can do to prevent the rain from coming down. There is a lot that you can do to prevent wildfires. And I think that's where the focus needs to be in California specifically. And I do wonder, I think the most interesting thing about the fires in LA is, will this be the thing that potentially turns the citizens of California against the sort of progressive nonsense? Because the thing about governing, in my opinion, and I think that most people probably have this opinion, is we want you to do the basic stuff first. We want you to build roads. We want you to fix potholes. I want the water, when I turn it on, to have clean water coming out of my faucet. I don't want to run out of that water. I want to have electricity. I would like all of this stuff to be as affordable as possible. There's all sorts of things that government needs to do, and they need to do it well. The problem with this sort of blue state, blue city mentality is they're foregoing doing that stuff well, and they're setting these lofty goals of, we want to reduce inequality. We want to solve the mental illness problems. They're doing all these things that government has not traditionally been good at doing or has ever done successfully. And they're focusing on that stuff and not doing the basic governance well. And I think California is a great example of that, the fire hydrants were empty. They say they had all these reservoirs. They were all full. But the one in the Pacific Palisades had been shut down since February because there was, I guess, a tear in the roof of the facility, of the water tower. And That was February of 2024. It's almost been a year and they've not fixed the tear. And so that did not have something like couple million gallons of water in it. And I'm sure that could have helped. I don't think it would have put these fires out. Again, this is not something that wouldn't have solved the fires. Maybe it could have protected some more. And certainly firefighters need that water. But my question is not, why was there not water in there? My question is, why did you have a rip in the roof of it in February and it's been almost a year and that's not been repaired? That seems like something that you should repair as quickly as possible. Or, for example, California decided wildfires are a problem. You know what we need to do? We need to have more water available. And so they want to have more reservoirs. They passed a proposition in 2014. We are 10 years past that. They've built 0 of them. None of those. Some are supposed to come online in 2027. I think the last one's maybe supposed to come online in like 2037 or something. So, like, why does it take that long? Like, the people said, they voted for a thing that said, yes, we want the government to build more of these water reservoirs. We need better water management. We're saying, yes, we want to do that. We want to spend our tax dollars on it. And yet nothing's happening. I think that California is kind of a great example of sort of stuff happens in California and then it kind of happens nationwide because California is a gigantic state. And what I'm wondering is that the combination of Trump getting reelected in the fall, in November, and sort of a rejection of there's been sort of a rejection of a lot of the progressive stuff, the DEI stuff, the racism stuff, just a lot of the nonsense where people are clearly saying, we want government to work well. We want you to do that part of your job first, and then you can start tackling this other stuff. I do wonder if there will be a sort of backlash because of these fires. Like, does Gavin Newsom survive his term? Does the mayor of LA, does Karen Bass survive her term? I don't know. These are questions for California. So I don't live in California, so I can spout opinions of it, but it's really up to the people that live there to decide if these people are doing the job that they say they're supposed to do. And I think it's pretty clear that there are ways that you can prevent wildfires. I think you can do prescribed burns. Obviously, preventing crazy people from setting fires. There are just crazy firebugs that set fires in California a lot. A lot of homeless people, a lot of mentally ill people, drug addicted people, power lines falling down. Like, whatever they need to do to figure out, okay, how do we do 2 things? How do we prevent wildfires from starting in the first place? And then how do we contain them once they do start? They've got to figure that out because they've got the only kind of natural disaster that's somewhat preventable. And it's tragic that, gosh, I mean, the footage and the pictures I cannot imagine. Entire areas look like a nuclear bomb went off. And this is tens of thousands of families. This is tens of thousands of business owners. This is affecting all sorts of people that it's really easy on the right to vilify California as, oh, those crazy progressive Californians. Yeah, I mean, look, I think they've voted for some pretty terrible policies and some pretty terrible politicians. I don't understand what the appeal of Gavin Newsom is. I can't figure, what has he done well? I'm literally asking. I do not understand what the appeal of him is. He promised, look, Gavin Newsom, here's my specific problem with Gavin Newsom. He knows this is a problem. When he got elected as governor, he said, we're not doing this wildfire stuff anymore. We are going to do controlled burns. We are going to prevent them from happening. No more of this bureaucratic red tape. And they set a goal after the 2020 fires of preventively burning 400,000 acres annually by 2025. So we've got the numbers from 2024. They burned 37,000 acres. So not even 10% of what the goal that Gavin Newsom set. So this isn't my goal. This isn't the wildfire experts' goal. This was like Gavin Newsom listened to those people and said, we need to be burning 400,000 acres annually by 2025. This was back in 2020 or 2021 when they said this. And they've not hit those markers even close. And it seems like everyone knows part of the solution and they're not executing. If you're the head executive of a state and you're not executing, what is the point? Would be my question. Is like, why is this person there? So I wonder if he'll survive. California is a place that has recalled governors before. If you remember Jerry Brown, and that's how Arnold Schwarzenegger becomes the governor of California. So, it's worth thinking about. Like, will that potentially happen? We'll see. I'm not terribly optimistic, but I do think that this could be a tipping point for California and for politics. What my concern as a conservative is is will someone come in and be able to govern well? I think Republicans right now, if they're smart, need to take advantage of this and say, we're going to govern well. I don't love Ron DeSantis. I think he's got some authoritarian tendencies. I think he picks some fights that is not necessary. I also think he's just not, I think he wants to be a great politician, but he's a better executive than he is politician. But I will give him this. I think he runs like the state of Florida. He's running hurricane stuff well. I think he's done a good job at natural disasters. And by the way, it's worth bringing up, Florida has wildfires too, if you are not aware. But they have had a policy since the 80s or 90s that says, like, we are going to do preventative burns. You can call a number and basically get a permit to do a burn right then on the phone. It takes a day or something to get that. You can do training for it. In California, it takes months to even propose doing a prescribed burn, and then you might get sued. There's all these legal loopholes. There's also a lot of, I think in California, there are interests that are conflicting with preventing wildfires. For example, Cal Fire, this is not me trying to vilify firemen, but there have been firemen that work for Cal Fire that have set fires so that they could get overtime. That's a problem. There are perverse incentives there. But in Florida, they're prone to wildfires too. And if you notice, we've not had an out of control wildfire in Florida, at least that I remember in my lifetime. But it's because they do a lot of these prescribed burns. So there are solutions to these problems. And I think Republicans need to be the party, if they can manage it, at least at state levels. I'm not trusting that this can happen on the national level right now, because I think Republicans are a mess. I think Donald Trump will not bring any sort of sense of good governance to the federal government. I don't think he can rein in the stuff that he wants to. I don't think he can stop the bureaucracy. I'm for some of this stuff. I'm for some of the deregulation. I'm for some of a lot of the deregulation. I'm for a lot of the federal government's not working. Let's scrap a lot of this. I'm not optimistic that DOGE is going to do a lot of good, but I hope they do. And I'm with them on their mission of government should be efficient. They should be good at their jobs. But I think at the state level, what I would be curious to see is will the Republican Party rise up in California that did turn a little bit more red in November? Several counties that turned more red, several seats. I mean, honestly, the only reason Republicans have a majority, slim as it may be, is because of some red seats in California and New York that they got. So they are picking up a little bit of steam. It's not that California is a red state or anything right now, or will be in the near future, or maybe ever. But I do wonder, if Gavin Newsom got recalled, would Republicans give a Republican a chance? The last one they gave a chance, I believe, was Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't think he did a great job. He did some good things, but I don't think he was a great governor. Could they elect someone that could actually do some good in California? And maybe people will realize, oh, this is what government's supposed to do. So, we'll see what happens. Okay. The next thing I've got to talk about as I take a sip of water is TikTok. In a few days, TikTok is going to be banned in the United States. I'm putting air quotes around that if you're watching, because it's not really a ban on TikTok. It's a little more complicated than that. So let's actually talk about it. So here's a little thing about TikTok is that if you're not aware, I'm not on the platform because I've just dealt with saying, if I think that this thing is bad, I'm not going to do it just because I could get more views or something. So I've stuck to YouTube and Instagram, and I'm not on TikTok. So I'm not going to pretend I'm some TikTok expert. I understand that people really like the platform. Essentially what happened is TikTok created an algorithm that's just better than the other ones at hooking people and keeping their eyeballs on the platform. And it's really good at giving you videos that you want to see, that you're interested in, to keep you on the platform. And so they grew really fast. Back in 2017, when Trump was anti-TikTok and he was the one trying to ban TikTok, I think they had, it was fewer than 30 million members. And I think now they have over 180 million US users. So it's grown a lot in the last several years, and it's dominating some of the other platforms. Well, the problem is they're owned by ByteDance, which is, sort of technically in the Cayman Islands, but is still controlled by the Chinese government, because China has a law that says companies operating in China must share all collected data with the government. But they also have to deny that publicly. And it doesn't even matter if they're not doing business in China. If it's a Chinese company, ByteDance is a Chinese company, even though it has American investors and stuff, China still has a stock in ByteDance, even though they're doing, even though their user base is in the US and they're saying, oh, this app is in the US. I mean, it's worldwide too, but they actually don't allow that version of TikTok in China, which is very curious, right? I mean, it's kind of weird, right? China doesn't really like free speech, so don't pretend this is a free speech issue. But so here's some of the data that TikTok collects, and I should note, so do Meta, so does Instagram, so does Facebook, so does YouTube. A lot of the social media companies collect all this information, but just to let you know what TikTok collects on users: name, age, your username, your email, password, phone number, location. That stuff's basic, right? We know that stuff because you fill it out on a form. It's also obviously storing all the contents of your messages, when they're sent, when they're received and read, by who are they read, who are you sending messages to. They can actually analyze the text, the images, the videos, all of that's in your clipboard. This is not something I actually realized until the newest version of iOS on iPhone. You'll notice maybe every once in a while when you're on your phone that you'll go into an app and it'll say, hey, do you want to allow paste in this app? And you weren't trying to paste anything. That's because that application is trying to grab the contents of your clipboard. So you may have copied some text from a message, or you may have copied a recipe or a URL and you're pasting it into a note. The thing about copying and pasting, especially in the Mac ecosystem, is that when I copy something on my desktop computer here, it's a unified clipboard. That's on my clipboard on my phone too, and my iPad or whatever else. And so these apps are trying to say, I just want that information just in case it has something good in it. I want to know what they have on their clipboard. That's why you get that notification now in iOS, is it's saying, hey, this thing is basically trying. I actually wish it would be more clear. And so it's asking, do you want to allow paste? Because that application is asking you to paste it without you commanding the paste. Yikes. I don't love that, okay? Apple's obviously trying to mitigate that a little bit by, I have to click the allow paste. So I would suggest not clicking allow paste unless you're actually trying to paste into that application. Don't worry if you say don't allow, it will allow you to paste later if you are the one that pasted it. So yeah, TikTok's grabbing that information. It's also grabbing purchase information, payment card numbers, billing and shipping addresses, users' activities on other websites and in stores, including what products they're looking at, and so they can advertise to you. File names, your file types. If you give them access to your photo library, it has access to the entire photo library, not just the photos that you post. I know TikTok's a video thing, but when you give it access to your camera roll, you are giving it access to all the pictures, all the videos on that roll. It can go through all of them. It can upload all of them. Now, it's not doing that probably most of the time because it would be an outrageous amount of data that you'd be sending up and down, but it does have access to all of them, okay? You know, it can even analyze the scenery in videos to know where you're at, what kind of, what monuments or things are in the background that are popular, touristy kind of things. So it can do all this kind of stuff. Biometric identifiers. Now, look, that is what all social media companies are pulling on you. The difference here is that the Chinese government has access to that information on 170 million United States users. And so Donald Trump wanted to ban, he tried to do it via executive order. It didn't work out. And then Congress passed a law last year that said, look, ByteDance has to divest. They have to sell to a United States company, or they can no longer be made available on app stores. And so it's basically saying, okay, look, it's not really a ban because it's not like TikTok's going to disappear on the 19th when this goes into effect. It's just that you won't be able to download it from the app stores anymore. You won't be able to do updates on it anymore. But if you have TikTok on your phone, it will continue to work for a while. The arguments against this are that it's a free speech issue, which I don't buy because the law nowhere says that people don't have the right to make silly dancing videos. It's just that they're saying an adversarial country does not have, they cannot own a company that does this kind of stuff. And so that's essentially what they're saying. And by the way, this is not new. We don't allow foreigners, not just foreign countries, but we don't allow foreigners to own media companies in the United States. We don't allow it. That's why Rupert Murdoch had to become a United States citizen to start Fox News. We would not allow him to have a broadcast company. So we've had this kind of law for decades. We've said, no, we don't want the idea. And the reason we had that law is to say, okay, if you had even like an English guy or like I said, the broadcast laws aren't even specific to adversaries, although this TikTok law is specific to adversarial countries like China, Iran, North Korea. North Korea and Iran and Russia are not developing a lot of apps, actually. But China is trying to. So the problem with TikTok that I think everyone should understand is that the Chinese government has access to all that information. And most people say, well, what's the big deal? I don't have anything to hide. And you say that, except that imagine, this is not actually something you have to imagine. This is happening right now. China has access to 170 million United States users on the platforms. All of that data that I just said. They have access to all of that. There's a BuzzFeed article which detailed some audio tapes from TikTok meetings where they admitted that they accessed that private information to track journalists, for example. So that what they did specifically was they were looking at, there were some journalist outfits that posted some stuff that was bad about TikTok, and it had some internal sourcing within that. And they were trying to find who their internal leak was. So they tracked the journalist location to see who they had met, like where they had been, to see if it overlapped with any of their employees' location data. That's one example of something that the Chinese government can do with American users' information. So they could see, oh, here's someone that's outspoken against, or here's a former Chinese national that now lives in the US. We could track them. We could see who they're meeting with. We could see who their acquaintances are. Keep in mind, this is not just when you're posting the videos or watching videos. If they have that location data, they can see everywhere you go. Especially if you allow the app to use your location in the background, not just when you're using the app. So that's why the government has said you cannot have TikTok on federal government devices, and most states have passed a thing like that, says you can't have that, because we realize the danger of letting a foreign enemy, and I realize our relationship with China is complicated. Our economies are really entwined with each other, and that makes it really hard for them to be like a Cold War situation, like Russia was in the Cold War. But imagine China having the ability to track 170 million United States users, all that data that they have about them. The children of 2017 are, if you were a teenager then, you graduate high school, you might be in the workforce now, you might be working for the FBI or police forces or things like that. And what if China knows, okay, we've got all the messages this person sent. Maybe you're DMing some people that are not your spouse. Maybe that can be a blackmail situation where they can get information they want. There's all sorts of dangerous reasons we shouldn't allow China to have access to all of that data. And that's what this law is about. It's just about, no, we will not allow a foreign adversary to own a company like this, the social media company. And, to be fair, China, just for the record, does not allow Facebook or Instagram or even TikTok inside of their country. So it is absolutely the government's right to say, hey, foreign nationals, foreign governments cannot have access to our private data. I realize people are going to say, well, what about Facebook? They're grabbing the same information. That might be a good reason to not let Facebook have all that information. That might be a good reason to go change some of your privacy settings or leave those platforms. That's fine. That's your choice as an American. But I'm not worried about Mark Zuckerberg using that information to start World War III or something, or to send you propaganda. Now, Facebook's had all sorts of problems, and now Facebook's making like a 180 on the stuff they did in 2020 during the election and sort of the kowtowing they did to the Biden administration on misinformation, most of which ended up being true on their platform. And they're kind of like letting the reins go and saying, all right, well, it's back to free speech. I love talking about free speech. I love free speech. I think we don't talk about it enough. I think we don't value it enough. But the TikTok ban is not about free speech. And that's the goal this week. So last Friday, the Supreme Court heard arguments because a last-ditch effort by ByteDance, and to some degree now Trump, because he is now pro-TikTok. He claims it's because he won the youth vote by 35%. He did not win the youth vote. He gained 11% compared to 2020, but he still lost it to Kamala Harris. He certainly made gains he should be proud of. But it's really because he's buddies with a big investor in ByteDance, one of the American investors, when they originally had to kind of pretend to divest from being a Chinese company. And that guy got in his ear, and he's a donor. And that's how you change Trump's mind. Trump's mind did not change because something fundamentally changed about TikTok from when he was the one trying to ban it in his first administration. It's just that he's buddies with an investor now, and he thinks he won the youth vote by 35%. which he did not. And so, that's why Trump's mind has changed. And Trump wants to be able to kick this past the 19th so that he can do something. But that is not how our Constitution works. Presidents cannot undo laws that were passed by Congress when they're not the president. They can veto a bill if they're the president. If Congress sends something up starting next week and Trump's the president, he can veto it. But he can't veto legislation that Congress passed and Joe Biden passed and Joe Biden signed. It's not how the Constitution works. It's not how it should work. My gosh, can you imagine? Like, every president would just come in and undo every piece of legislation that happened. If Trump wants to undo the law, he has to go through Congress. Congress has to rescind this law or write another law to be able to do that. So by all means, it looks like they will shut down U.S. operations on January 19th. And we will see what happens from there. There are already some people that are flocking to another Chinese, more explicitly Chinese sort of propaganda app. People are dumb. We can let people be dumb, but it's like, national security is a thing. And I think Congress has a right to write laws that protect national security. And honestly, I'd much rather it go through Congress than what we typically see, which is just the president signing executive orders or agencies or the president saying, oh, this is a national security threat. For example, Joe Biden just did this with the merging of U.S. Steel and I can't remember the Japanese company that wanted to buy them. And he blocked it. And he claimed it was for national security reasons. But at the same time, we sold a whole bunch of weapons to Japan. Japan is not our enemy. They have not been since World War II. They're actually a close ally of ours. To pretend that Japan, first of all, bailing out U.S. Steel, that's really what they were doing, is there will be jobs lost in the U.S. steel industry, which does not bother me. I don't like protectionism. I say if you can't make it without government intervention, then you can't make it. That's capitalism. I believe in true free market capitalism, not this bull crap where the government props certain industries up or, gives sugar, like the sugar subsidies in this country are outrageous. It's propping up an industry that would otherwise have to compete with the rest of the world. I don't like protectionism, but there will be lost steel jobs. U.S. Steel might go under. Who knows? We'll see. Because Joe Biden blocked this merger, and it doesn't have anything to do with national security. He's full of it. But I like when Congress gets together and says, okay, we're going to pass a law. Like I said, there's the buy-in from 500 people that go into passing that law, and then the president has to sign it. And so I'm not saying there aren't bad laws and that Congress hasn't passed bad national security laws. They absolutely have. I just haven't seen a convincing argument that this TikTok ban is one of them. I think it's the right move, and it's not because I hate TikTok. It's not because I'm old, although I am. And I get that there's going to be a bunch of kids that are all of a sudden going to have way too much free time because they're not going to have time to be on TikTok because it's not there anymore. Or there's going to be all sorts of creators like myself that are making a lot of money on TikTok. And I get that that's going to suck. But I do think we have to look at this on the whole and say that it is not good for China to have this kind of access to so many United States citizens' private data where they can push the algorithm to say certain things. There have been a couple studies. This is kind of one part that I'm a little bit hesitant to talk about, but I think it's worth at least bringing up. A lot of articles that are sort of pro this TikTok ban have cited this recent study that came out where they said, okay, we finally did like a peer-reviewed study of the algorithm, and we think that it's pretty obvious that China is definitely putting their thumb, or someone, ByteDance, China, whoever it is putting the thumb on the scale for they basically created similar accounts on Instagram and TikTok. So they pretend to be like a 17-year-old girl or whatever. They did several accounts like this. And then they were seeing like how much pro-China content versus anti-China content, et cetera, are they seeing on the platforms. And I think they showed that 80% of the China content on Instagram was negative and only 11% on TikTok was negative. Or you look at the Israel-Palestine conflict, that shortly after October 7th, there was a lot of, this was mostly anecdotal in my opinion, but evidence that there was more anti-Israel and anti-Semitic material on TikTok, and there was less of that on Instagram and Facebook and things like that. So the reason I'm a little hesitant to like cite this study, it's one study. I'm a little curious. I've looked into some of the methodology. I don't really understand how you can, like I said, they're not looking under the hood. They can't actually see the real algorithm. They can't get into ByteDance's servers. They're doing this all based on creating test accounts and measuring them against each other. But that could also just be that like Instagram suppresses the anti-China sentiment more. You know what I mean? There could be other factors involved. And so I'm hesitant to say that China, the government, is absolutely already putting their thumb on the scale of that algorithm, although I would be willing to bet they are. I mean, look, they suppress all that information inside of China. If they have the ability to do so outside of China, why would they not try to make it be more pro-China content? There was a thing last year that went around where this letter from Osama bin Laden kind of got caught a little bit of fire. I actually don't think it was that big of a deal. I think that mostly this is a thing where you see a news article nowadays and it's like, people are outraged at X, Y, and Z. And then you go look at the article and it cites some guy on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. It cites some guy that has, 13 followers. That's not people are outraged. I mean, look, if someone has millions of followers or even tens of thousands of followers, are actually influential, are they in the media? Let's write about it. But I think so often we can do what David French at the New York Times calls nut picking, where you pick the craziest person on the other side of the argument and say, that's representative of that whole side. And so I think there's a little bit of that goes on here. But I mean, the study's worth looking at. It did find that China, there was like more pro-China stuff on TikTok. Like I said, 80% was negative on Instagram, 11% was negative on TikTok. That's a pretty big discrepancy there, and it's worth looking into. But the point is, China can do that if they want to. They have access to all this data. They could blackmail people. They could track United States citizens. They could track journalists. They could track government workers. Because keep in mind, here's another thing about China. China steals all sorts of stuff. They steal tons of intellectual property. They've hacked into, previously they've hacked into Equifax. They hacked into a government database that had something like 80% of federal employees' data inside of it. So let's just say you're the Chinese government. You have access to 3 gigantic piles of data. You have all the TikTok user data, sometimes which could be anonymized, obviously, in the sense that like I could create a TikTok account that doesn't use my real name and things like that, although it can probably figure me out pretty quickly based on where I am, knows where my home is, certainly if my phone is at home. Then it has all this Equifax data. So it has my credit history. It has like my full credit stuff. It has my social security number, all this kind of stuff connected to that. Then you've got a third database of federal employees. It's pretty easy to cross-reference all those and figure out, okay, let's find a United States federal employee that has financial problems and has been messaging women on the side that aren't his wife. That's an easy, I could do that if I had that data. It'd be easy enough to figure out. It's like match credit scores with federal employees and then look for those users on TikTok and find the ones that have things that we could blackmail them for. This is totally doable by the Chinese government right now. And I think we should be scared of that. And this isn't any of the things that I've seen it being accused of. So I think that it's worth paying attention to this. And the reason I think this will matter is because I think we have to have a conversation about if we just jump from TikTok to another Chinese app, we've done nothing. Now, this law would apply to those other apps as well. So, we're potentially going to see something like that where maybe there'd be a trigger for those to sell too. And by the way, the solution to all of this was ByteDance just sells it to US investors only, and the Chinese government no longer has access to it. And ByteDance was not willing to sell the valuable thing they have because the Chinese government has said, you cannot have the algorithm. That means the algorithm and TikTok is worth more to them than the money they could make by selling it. That to me shows that the value is in the data they have and the manipulation they can do of it. So I think that is just worth paying attention to. All right, that does it for me on this episode of The Homeless Conservative. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time with me. I really appreciate it. I know your time's valuable, and so I appreciate that you're here. And if you can do one thing for me, it'd be go rate the podcast. That's the best thing you do, wherever you listen to it. Apple, Spotify, Google. There are other platforms, I'm sure, but I'm not aware of them. That helps me a lot. If you can do 2 things for me, share a short or a reel on YouTube, Instagram, wherever you like to be, with a friend that you think might enjoy it. If you think it's insightful, if you think it's got good information, that helps me too, just kind of spreading the word, building up the audience, because I know there are smart people. I know there are people in this country that want good government, and I know there are people that are sick of the tribal politics, and I'm one of those people, and I want to not contribute to that because I want this country to be better. I know it can be better. I know we can solve these problems, but I feel like we're just fighting with each other all the time right now. And it's not that I think it's going to be kumbaya. That's not it at all. I think liberals have bad ideas. So do Republicans right now. And let's talk about the ideas. Let's hammer out the ones that are good, and let's move forward. All right. Thanks a lot for joining me. I'll catch you next time.